We're lucky to have three wonderful people here today. This is, I'm also a mom. I'm the executive director at CIF, but I'm also a mom. I'm also an adult civ. And this is an area that is so exciting to me. Something that I really haven't been following along over the last 5 years very much. So having met these really innovative thinking folks on what can be possible has kind of started making me think totally differently on what type of supports and how to put things together that will make a successful environment for my son. The supportive and adaptive technologies really can change the life of an individual with disabilities in very profound ways. As with all technology solutions, they are ever-changing, rapidly it seems like, but really their focus has been how do we provide support in a remote way for individuals with disabilities. We've invited today 3 of the top 5 in the nation to be here and be able to share some stories with all of you. We have Dwayne Temple, co-founder and co-owner of Night Owl Support Systems. There you are. Dustin Wright, executive director of Rest Assured Support Systems. And Cameron Kempson, director of Simply Home. If you hold your questions until we're done with hearing from all 3, I think that would probably be best, and then we'll be able to entertain questions after that. On your tables are sticky notes and markers. We always put those out. I know that if you have a question, you're afraid to forget it, and so you can't always hear what's being said. Write your question down on the sticky note so that you don't forget it, and then we'll get to that after their presentations. We're going to start with Dwayne Temple from Night Owl Support Systems. Come on up, Dwayne. And here you go.
I have a mic, I think.
All right.
Can everyone hear me okay? All right. It's my first time on stage this morning. I hope I don't screw this up. Thank you all for inviting me down. Jackie for being very persistent, and Ann I met through a phone conference recently. Very exciting time. I'll tell a little bit more about it. I just want to start out with a video, and we'll go from there. Kind of.
Night Owl works with individuals that need more support than they currently are getting. Traditionally, that option has been overnight care staff.
It is at an epidemic level where agencies are struggling to hire staff to fill vacancies. So NOS provides that by replacing the overnight hours where a caregiver would be spending the night in someone's house. We can provide that remote supervision at a fraction of the cost.
Night Owl often provides a creative solution for numerous situations that people we support might find themselves in. Someone may be looking for their own place for the first time and moving out of mom and dad's home. Night Owl can provide that assurance for family members that their loved ones are safe, and also provide the independence for the person moving out for the first time.
The technology that NOS uses is pretty incredible. So they are smart sensors that capture all kinds of activity, ocean, sounds, people stepping on things, moisture. There are all kinds of sensing devices we use.
We customize the sensors to meet the needs of everyone we support.
Every sensor is connected to our system. It sends us a signal when they're alerted. It is silent in the home so it doesn't wake people up. It allows us to open up communication if necessary. The monitoring staff at that point follow the script in front of them of the person's care plan. Sometimes it might be calling and talking to the person, open two-way communication, or it might be dispatching a person that's called a responder that will go to someone's home because a physical response is necessary.
Responders can be a variety of people, whether it be a paid staff member, somebody who's on call, a neighbor. NOS works with teams to figure out what their best responder situation can be for the individuals we support.
Ultimately, it's someone that's getting paid overtime, that's tired, that's already worked a 40-hour week, that's going to someone's house to work the overnight because there are no other solutions.
Night Owl can provide an alternative to this problem by providing the oversight for the individual, assurance for the family, as well as providing support at a fraction of the cost of what traditional supports have cost.
So you got to ask yourself, how do they do it, right? How does it work? What makes it happen? First of all, I got to tell you a little bit about myself and the people that work with me. We are not a bunch of computer geeks that designed a bunch of gadgets and said, oh, we're going to do some really neat things with them. We're actually people that have spent our adult lives working in the field with people with disabilities. And likewise, my other two business partners, they have spent their whole lives working with people with disabilities. And Chris has a sister with a disability that we actually support today. My other business partner, Danny, her dad was injured in the Vietnam War, so when he would go home and take off his prosthetic leg and do things around the house, it was just a normal environment for her. So my start was, I was in high school looking for a job, and I stumbled across a place in Illinois called, I grew up in Illinois, but stumbled across a school called St. Francis School for Exceptional Children in Freeport, Illinois, and I didn't know what to expect. The school at the time was run by the Sisters of St. Francis, so you can guess that when I was in high school, 7th hour, people weren't showing up for work. They did have a staffing crisis back then. I would get a note from my counselor saying, hey, you need to call Sister Ruth Ann, and they would ask me to go to work. So that was my first exposure working with people with disabilities, and it's kind of what kind of grounded me in my thinking and some of where our company comes from. Technology is only a small part of what we do. It's the invisible service that we provide behind the scenes that help people focus on independence, focus on quality of life. How can we make those things work for people moving out from home or moving from one group home out into the community? We work with all those things. And as I'm sure my cohorts, I will call them today, are here, but the systems can be tailored to meet the needs of every person that we support. Some people might need some things, some people need other things, but it's not a package A or a package B. It's the supports you need. It comes through an assessment process. So that's kind of how we are, who we are, and how we got started. And some of the goals of technology are very obvious. Valuable outcomes. It's, you know, what are we doing? Is it measurable? Cost savings. It definitely saves a lot of money because you now have you're using technology in lieu of having a support staff in someone's home. And I don't know if you guys, as developers, hear as much as we hear, and the providers can tell you, is that there is a crisis nationwide with shortages of staff, and it's only getting worse, and it's only getting worse, to the point where agency directors are often going in to fill shifts during the overnights because there's nobody else to do it. So they're the on-call people sometimes. They get called in. And so that's why we use technology. That's why the onset of this has become very popular. And I know Michaela was talking about this morning about reinventing the wheel, and I firmly believe that. I think that we are at a time that, yes, it is a crisis, but we do have opportunity. And will this solve all the problems? Probably not, but it will solve quite a few. So our company specifically, it's composed of 4 different pieces. One of it is we have a central monitoring station where it's like a 911 call center. An alarm comes in, it brings up a script. We work with the agencies behind the scenes setting up how that works, okay? I mean, how our staff are supposed to respond to those things, how we can react to those things. Some of it might be, honestly, just opening up and talking to a person, hey, is everything okay? No, I need my meds and I can't reach them. Maybe it's someone that doesn't have the range of motion to reach those. Other people, it might just be clicking on another button saying, okay, they can go to the bathroom, or someone might be going out to smoke and we need that assurance that they came back in. So the monitoring station plays a big role there. It also, for us, it lines up a lot of checks and balances. So what happens if someone's power goes out, or what happens if someone's phone line goes out, because that's how the signal is transmitted. At the monitoring station, we have those things. We have those backup capacities. So we know that if something doesn't work and how we're going to resolve that. Then you have the technology in people's homes, and that could be anything. Our company doesn't use cameras at this point. We use a lot of different sensing devices. I mean, you name a door, window sensors, smoke detectors, a variety of personal pagers. We use flood sensors because people have accidents. Things happen. We can assess those things as we go through. So the technology in both scenarios, at the monitoring station and in someone's home, they're connected. They both play a big role. And then you can have all the technology in the world that you can get. But if you don't have someone responding to it, whether it's a family member, a paid caregiver, someone that can be at someone's house when they need that person, you really don't have anything. So you have to combine that piece of it.
The other part that is very important to us from day one was developing what we call our consumer relations team. And what that is when we start providing services, during intake we have a screening tool. It's a referral form that people would fill out. We get that, we call up the agency, we ask a bunch of questions. From there we develop a support strategy. So by the time we're installing in someone's home, we have a plan, a support plan for everybody in that home. So if that sensor goes off at 2 o'clock in the morning, what is the response to that? And with that comes a lot of data, comes a lot of activity, comes a lot of inactivity. What do we do with all that data? Well, our consumer relations team, they sit down with that every morning, they look at all the reports, and they start looking at, okay, is this person normally get up at 6:30 and open their door? Well, yes, they're looking for a paper, but today this guy did it at 5 o'clock in the morning. Why is that different? Is there something else going on? Is it a developing pattern? We touch that consumer relations team, then starts reaching out to the provider saying, hey, these are some things we're seeing or some things we're not seeing, and how do we address those? So the ongoing changes, the ongoing support needs that change with that person can be addressed very rapidly. So those are the 4 components of our program. I thought I would switch up a presentation because, and these guys I'm sure will be in the same boat I'm in, is we normally take about an hour to an hour and a half to just present our program because of the complexities of kind of what we do. And to shrink it all into a 10-minute spiel, I think it would be more valuable if I could tell you guys a couple stories about some people that we support and how it's been life-changing for them from start to finish. Dan came to us. His mother was a single mother working, and Dan has Prader-Willi syndrome. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with Prader-Willi syndrome, but Dan had a history of seeking food and unhealthy foods. I mean, he would take frozen pizzas out of the freezer and he would eat them frozen. Or he would hoard food. He would take food and hide it in his bed so his mom wouldn't find it. Weeks later, she would find stuff that was not healthy to eat. And so at any rate, she got the restrictive measures in place, locked up all the refrigerators and the cabinets so Dan didn't have access to the unhealthy foods when she wasn't there. And it got to be the point where she had lost several jobs because of the stress level that she would be at work thinking about, did I lock up the fridge? Did I lock up this? Did I lock up that? And she would be so stressed out about it, she would leave. She would go home just to make sure everything, give it a second glance, make sure things were locked up. So when she approached us, we simply just put sensors on all the different things that she had locked. And that way she would know that if she forgot, she would send a signal to her. But then she wanted Dan to have his own apartment. And so that's where things got interesting, because now we were taking him without having his mother living in the same home as him. He was going to be living on his own. And so as she being the responder, we were able to take the technology, set up in his own apartment, but it worked the same way. So she knew at 6 o'clock staff would be leaving at night. It would also give him that freedom to be by himself. But if she got an alarm after 6 o'clock, or if we got an alarm, we would talk to him. And various things changed throughout Dan's life while we were supporting him. But the main thing was mom was able to have a life outside of that. So they both were. So he got his own apartment, got to live more independently, and mom got her independence back as well. So that was a very important thing for them. Mark and Sue are 2 people we support that are very, it would be very challenging for a lot of, because they had a staff living with them all night long, because they both were non-ambulatory and required wheelchair assistance. And when they were in bed at night, they were in bed. That was it. They went to bed and they would call staff out. Staff would check on them all night long, or every hour, something like that is when it started. But when we went in there, we actually found some ways that they could actually summon us for help. Like we took a strike plate sensor that you see, the handicap accessible doors, you push the button, it opens the door. We turned that into a paging button. So if Sue, she kicks the strike plate, it opens up the 2-way communication. We talk to her, what do you need? Well, I need help with this, or I need help with that. Staff left the light on. Whatever the need is, we can assess it and go help her if need be. So they get to have that freedom. Her and her husband get to live in their own apartment, and they get to live this way with the support they need with the technology. Jake's story, Jake came to us with a lot of complex needs. He had a history of beating up staff, and to the point where, the whole story is, if you're a residential provider, someone is in the crisis, what do? You don't want to think outside the box. You just want to keep throwing more staff at the person. And so that's what the agency did. They double staffed him because of these moments of crisis. And when he got into these confrontations with his staff, he became aggressive. Then they were restraining and they were doing lots of things like that. And So he came to us in a crisis home type setting, and we provided the monitoring for him, and the staff was on site. But it was what they found out over 6 months was that it was that adverse interaction with the staff that he was having. One staff would come in and say, okay, these are the rules, we need to follow these rules. And then when another staff came in, they followed a different script of rules. And so the problem was, Jake got very upset, and the rules kept changing. In his world, the rules kept changing. And so it was that interaction with staff, multiple times of being incarcerated, multiple times of being placed back in the institution, for lack of better words. He started using our services, and at first we were like, no, we can't do this. This guy's going to need staff in there. But what we found is we only gave him the support he needed. If he paged, we would ask him what he needed. If it was something that we could provide, then we would go down and provide it. This guy today is living in the community safely, has a job competitively, and he doesn't have that overnight staff, so he doesn't have those adverse interactions with what's going on with the staffing situations. Lastly, Mary's story. Mary now was living with her family. Mary has a traumatic brain injury, and the father wanted her to have her own apartment and all those things. And they knew the only way that would happen is if they actually bought a condo or bought an apartment, or paid for an apartment, and they were the staff for her. That was the only way they could afford to have this, but they couldn't afford to have overnight staff. So we put the technology in, and he's the responder. So she needs something in the middle of the night, we call him, and he's actually the best responder of anybody out there, because as soon as we call him, he's over there in 2 minutes and telling us what's going on. So, but it has allowed those families, that not just the people that we support, but the families as well, to have that independence. And so that's what I want to share. And those are stories, they're real stories that work for us. So, and that's all I have to say about that.
My name is Dustin Wright. I'm the Executive Director of Rest Assured. We are also a remote supports provider. We provide a very similar service to what Dwayne was just talking about. But as Dwayne also kind of alluded to, one of the things that we kind of see ourselves as is a service provider. We just provide a support service to people with disabilities, or people with varying needs, I should say. And we really don't even look at ourselves as a technology provider. So when I try to describe this service, I really don't like to talk about the tech much, because the tech is just a medium to provide the service. So remote direct care, we sometimes call it telecare. Electronic monitoring was one of the first terms that was coined for this type of service that we're all talking about today. It doesn't sound very good, doesn't sound very friendly, doesn't sound very nice, does it? Electronic monitoring. Remote monitoring was another one that came up. Remote supports is kind of the term that we're all a little bit more using more and more these days. And that's, I think what our goal is here, and you'll get a theme of all of these presentations here, is with the change in technology and the change in times and some of the challenges that Dwayne was talking about, we as an industry have to start thinking about, how do we define support? What is support? Is that a body? Is that a person? When can a device or a piece of technology start to supplement what that human being was doing in the past, or augment what that human being is doing to support that individual? So at Rest Assured, we provide that remote caregiving service, and we really, to talk a little bit about the tech and kind of the model and how this all works. So in this model of support, there are two key people involved from our perspective. The first is a remote caregiver, which from our company is based back in Lafayette, Indiana, 2 hours south of here, where we have a support center, a group of caregivers sitting in a building, sitting in front of computers, providing support to people around the country that have this technology installed in their home. So the technology that gets installed into their home can kind of be broken down into three different types of devices. The first, we do use cameras. And I kind of purposely paused there to see what the faces look like around the room. I can tell you, when we were doing this 13 years ago, and I would say that, I had people get up and walk out. I mean, something has changed culturally in society, and technology's become such a big part of our lives that I don't get those looks anymore. Cameras are really only used when necessary to allow that remote caregiver to see certain areas of the home that they need to see, the common areas. You know, for obvious reasons, we're not going to be putting cameras in bedrooms and bathrooms, but maybe in a living room area, so we can see the front door, or looking down into the kitchen where the medicine is kept, or that kind of thing. So we can see those kinds of things. So the cameras allow that remote caregiver to see what's happening live and in real time so that they can watch that person as they're preparing a meal. So this is beyond just responding to emergency situations. This is actually observing activities of daily living and then assuring that those activities of daily living are done based upon that person's abilities, and we can coach through those types of things, and I'll explain that in a second. So the cameras let us see what's happening in the home. We also have a variety of different wireless sensors, which Dwayne was, and I'm not going to go through the list, but sensors that can pick up movement and lack of activity and changes in the environment and those kinds of things that are also sending those alerts back to that remote caregiver. So remote caregiver can see, remote caregiver can get sensor alerts so we can know what's happening in those areas of the home that we can't see. And then, as I was kind of alluding to before, the remote caregiver can actually interact and coach and prompt and cue and redirect and really assist that individual with whatever it is that they need while they're living in their home. So that remote caregiver can do everything that an on-site caregiver would do other than the hands-on. Right now, the technology is not in a spot where we can hit a button and physically assist someone up, or hand-over-hand assist with preparing a meal or whatever it is that the person needs. So when that type of support is needed, that's when the second person, key person in this model comes into play, which is a local backup person. So when that remote caregiver sees the need for that hands-on physical assistance, whether that's something of a routine nature or an abnormal situation that might have happened in the home, they can call that local backup person. Now, who that local backup person is going to be determined by the individual and their support team, by their family, by the provider agency that they're working with. So that can be a natural support like a family, friend, neighbor, something like that, or it can be more of a paid support through the local provider agency or something like that. So it's kind of those two people working together to provide support to the individual. So one, as Dwayne said, the individual gets the independence that they want, but we're also able to ensure their health and safety needs and help address the human resource shortages and a bunch of other side benefits. But ultimately, it's about the individual getting the independence and living the life that they want to live. So, and I think that when I was having this conversation 13 years ago, and the reason I was getting a lot of those reactions when we're talking about doing this type of model, is that people felt it was very Big Brother, right? And if you go to somebody and say, hey, we're putting a camera in your house and you don't have a choice, and this is we're going to put a camera right there and we're going to watch you sit on your couch. That's not, if there's no choice involved in that, absolutely, that's Big Brother. That is a complete invasion of privacy. But when this is a choice, and when this is built around that individual's needs and preferences, and with the ultimate end goal of meeting their desired goals and preferences in life, then that's when it does not become Big Brother, and that's when you start to see that independence and you start to see the benefits to the individual served, and that's really what it's all about. So I saw a lot of hands go up for family members that are in the room, right? Developers, providers. So I wanted to give an example of a woman that we were serving in Wisconsin. She was, I think, 16, 15 when we started serving her. She was still living in her family home. She was going to high school. And the family, the dad's very involved in the Down Syndrome Association in Wisconsin. And he had this, he's an engineer, so he had this huge thought out plan for his daughter. And I'm assuming he got his daughter's input. This huge thought out plan for his daughter and how he was going to slowly and incrementally increase her independence to where she was out living on her own, right? So what he did is he came to us and he had this after school window that was tough for him to get home and his wife. And it was tough to get somebody into the house for that 1 or 2 hour window until they were able to get home, but she was getting off the bus. And so he came to us and said, hey, we want to incorporate your system in our family home, in their family home. So they had our system in their family living room. And we were the support for their daughter post high school, post getting home from school. She was she had a gluten allergy. So we had to make sure that when she got home, and the first thing kids do, my daughter, right to the snacks, right? Like, go get something to eat. And we had to make sure she was getting those gluten-free snacks and doing those kinds of things to make sure that she was safe when she got home. Well, then the next step for him was to transition our system out of the family home and create a little suite for her in their family home, but it was her space, right? Her own private entrance, and we were the only support for her in her own space. She had a little kitchenette. It was her own apartment, but still there in her family home. So we went from in the family home to her own little place there in the family home, And we were the support for her and kind of taught her how to live on her own without anybody else. She had no direct care staff at this point. It was just remote caregiver. The next step for her was to move from the family home out into her own home once she was out of high school, and it was that time in her life and she was ready to make that move. And the system just transitioned with her into her new home. She brought that same remote caregiver with her, and that is one of the most important aspects in this model. Throw the technology out the window. Is that, again, it is a human being providing a support service to another human being, which everybody's very familiar with. It's just that we're doing it in a slightly different way, and that remote human being has to know the individual that they're serving. Just like a DSP is trained, caregiver is trained before they go into the home to support somebody on that individual's needs, we do the same thing. And she was able to take that same caregiver with her from her family home out into her new home in the community. So that's the ultimate goal, is to use that technology to create those independence options, reduce the cost of care, and just give people another choice, right? How many people have a home security system in their home right now? Some form or another, yeah? I mean, that's basically what we're using, the same type of technology. So imagine doing that, but instead of a cold, distant ADT person that you've never met, this is somebody that becomes a part of that person's life that is on the other end of that. And that's kind of what we do. So now I'll turn it over to Cameron.
So I'm Cameron Kenniston, and I'm the Director of Education with Simply Home. We are an enabling technology company in Asheville, North Carolina, which is in the mountainous part of the state. I am here today to share with you a little bit about what enabling technology is, what we do with technology, but even more importantly, to encourage and support you in appreciating that there are going to be a lot of technology vendors that you hear and see, and we are not in competition with each other. I think you'll notice this morning we each have different products to offer, different technologies. But our goal and my hope for you is that as you talk with vendors, you'll see that the goal is to provide some natural support and care for the individuals that we're serving. Simply Home is a national company, and we've worked in Canada as well. But we are a small company, and we choose to be small because it's important to us to maintain that quality versus getting so big that we lose that sense of connection with our families and the providers we serve. So let's talk a little bit about enabling technology from the perception of some of the people that we serve. I was telling the gentleman that I had dinner with last night, we were talking about the kinds of individuals that come to us, and the idea that sometimes we make assumptions about people and what their priorities and preferences and concerns are for their lives. And if you walk away with nothing from us today, know that's what we want to support you and your families in doing, is the priorities, the preferences, and the concerns. It's not just about needs and assumptions, right? It's about what your family member wants for themselves or what the people that you serve want for themselves. I went to do one of my first assessments with a 23-year-old gentleman who was dually diagnosed. And his primary diagnosis was his mental health piece. He was diagnosed at 12 years old with schizoaffective disorder and oppositional defiance. And for some reason, his provider at 19 years old decided it would be great to put him in a group home with 5 other men with oppositional defiance and aggression, right? So yeah, I know some. Like I'm looking up here, and some people are looking at me like, "Yeah, what do you mean? That's what we deal with all the time." So he and his mom said, "You know what? I can manage my own behavior if you get me out of this environment and you let me live on my own," which is what I want to do. I want to be on my own. So I was invited to go to the team meeting. I went to the team meeting, and I walk in, and it was one of those meetings in his apartment where there were probably 12, 15 people, and everybody's talking around Dakota and about Dakota, but nobody's talking with Dakota. And so he had basically taken his chair and had turned to the wall. And I said, Dakota, I want to know what it is you want for your life. And he turned around and he said, well, nobody's ever asked me that before. And I said, well, this is your apartment. If I could help you do some things in your apartment, what would that be? And he said, well, first of all, I'm not a preschooler. Being a former preschool special ed teacher, I looked around the apartment, and since he's a non-reader, they had put pictures up everywhere to give him cues, right? But he was 23. He didn't want to have pictures up everywhere because it would be embarrassing for him when friends came over. The other thing he said was, I'm tired of my staff telling me what to do. They had given him 2-on-1 staffing 24/7 for behavioral concerns. He had lost 7 staff in the 4 weeks that they had made the transition into this new spot. So I said, okay, what if technology could tell you what to do? And he said, it can do that? And then I had to hold to that word. At that time, Simply Home makes wireless sensor systems as well as sells standalone pieces of equipment, which we'll talk about later. I went back to the office and I said, could we not record our voice instead of giving a notification like front door is open? Could we not record a prompt for Dakota onto our system that says, grab your keys on the way out the door? Or, Dakota, you left your stove on, go turn it off. Or when you go to bed, when he would go into his bedroom at night, Dakota, put on your CPAP machine. So we did that. 6 months later, I do a follow-up check with Dakota. Actually, he did a follow-up check with me to tell me that he wanted some of the rules changed because he was tired of hearing the voice reminding him to get his keys because he had learned to get his keys. So I said, okay, great, we'll turn that rule off. I said, how's your staff? What's your staff up to? He said, well, just John's here now, so he's down to 1 staff. I said, well, how often is John there? He said, oh, he just comes a few hours a day, every day. He's really about there 4 to 6 hours a day, 7 days a week. So in 6 months' time, we went from 2 staff 24/7 down to 1 staff. At 9 months, Dakota calls me back. I need you to come get my technology out of here. I got my own home on our family land. Yay! So I went out there, and he's out in the parking lot playing basketball with peers from the apartment complex, typical peers. And he runs up, it's a hot July day, sweaty as all get out, gives me a big hug, and says, guess what? And I said, what? He said, I'm playing basketball with new friends, and I'm losing, and I haven't beat anybody up yet. That, my friends, is a success story. It has nothing to do with the direct impact of technology, but it created opportunity and possibility for him to learn other community skills. And I looked at the staff person, John, and I said, what's going on? And he said, you know, now that the technology tells him what to do, we don't fight anymore. And so now I'm taking him out in the community, and he's working on getting a job. We come out here and we play basketball in the afternoons, and I'm teaching him how to lose and how to connect with people. And I said, well, how often do you spend time with him? He said, 3 to 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. So now Dakota's living on his own independently on the weekends, okay? Amazing story. To this day now, he has his own job. He got a grant through the state. He makes birdhouses and rocking chairs, and by golly, does he come by every Christmas to our office and sell us a whole bunch? Yes, he does. He is quite the salesman, I will tell you, and quite the self-advocate. And that's what we want to see for the individuals we serve, right? We want them to become those self-advocates. We want them to self-determine what they want for their lives. You know, earlier Michaela was talking about risk. And one thing that we at Simply Home talk about is the dignity of risk. How many of us have left on the stove and walked out of the kitchen, right? Does anybody come to our house and take our stove out because it's unsafe that we did that? That happens all the time, people. I mean, it really does. How many of you have locked your keys in your apartment or in your car? You know, that's an inconvenience. It's not a safety issue per se. We can then use our smartphones to call somebody to come help us, right? Technology has become a natural support in our lives. Let us use technology to be a natural support in the lives of people with disabilities. We think about how technology can provide supports 24/7. Technology can do the alerts and notifications. So, if Dakota didn't turn off his stove, in 20 minutes time, he would get the alert to turn his stove off. If he didn't go in there and adjust or turn the stove off, the next thing that would happen was his mom would get a notification or his staff person would get a notification. They could call and check in on him. And then if it still didn't happen, that staff person had to be within about a 10 to 15 minute drive to connect with him. And so what that staff person was able to do then was serve several people in the same community and surrounding area at the same time without having to be just sitting in their homes. Allowing for some privacy and allowing for support without having that concern about the safety piece be so prevalent. The thing about technology is it is customizable. Both Dwayne and Dustin talked about that. Regardless of how our systems are different, they are all customizable. And so based on the ISP, based on what the individual tells us and the planning team and the family, we create the rules and the alerts and notifications to be customized to their day-to-day routines. I have a woman that I serve who is in Maryland. She swims 2 evenings a week, so her whole routines are different on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Mom gets different alerts at different days at different times. No big deal, we can make that happen on the technology. Another nice reason why that support is possible. And finally, a lot of times we hear about, well, what if the system malfunctions? What if there's inclement weather and the system goes down? Yes, there's battery backup, and yes, technology malfunctions. But so do human beings sometimes. We had a provider call us and say, your technology failed, somebody got out of their apartment and left for 45 minutes. Well, the gentleman had gotten off his bed pad, one alert went out, went out of his bedroom, the door alerted, went in front of the awake staff who was asleep on the couch, went out the back door, that alert went out. Those 3 alerts went to that staff person in the home and went to a supervisor outside of the home, and no one responded. So while we can appreciate that technology malfunctions, there's still that concern with human beings and direct support and natural support care too. As a family member, my daughter may need me, but then my mom, who has health issues, may need me too, and I have to make that decision, right? So I may not be able to get to my daughter as quickly as I need to get to my mom. So using technology and other systems of support are critical. And then finally, the most important thing that we want to think about is everything being person-centered. It's not device-centered. So I'm not taking a person and making them work their routines around how technology works. That technology works around the individual's outcomes. So it's like Dustin said earlier, we've quit marketing the technology because it changes all the time. What we're marketing to you or telling you stories about is we know outcomes exist that technology can be a natural support for. Let us find the correct or the supports that you need in equipment that can also be supports to your direct support and natural support staff. So quickly, when you're looking at technologies and you're assessing what you might need, think about this. We're looking at technologies from simple to sophisticated. So we have a young man in our office who's worked with us for 6 years now. They thought he needed a job coach. We did too. We didn't know any differently. But one day I found an old iPad in the back and I thought, he's so routine driven. I'm putting a $2.99 app on this iPad and giving it to him and see what we can do. He walked around with me, told me what his schedule was, took pictures, we downloaded them into his schedule, non-reader, but I put some sight words with the pictures. Comes back in my office about 20 minutes later, he said, Cameron, you forgot to put changing the toilet paper rolls on my schedule. And I said, well, come on, let's go take a picture. He said, I already did it. He had watched me do this routine once of how to download the pictures and put it in the schedule. He did it himself. I called the ARC right then. I was like, you wouldn't believe what Brian just did. opened up a whole new world for him. So now he creates his own schedule. He just got a job at Sam's. They called us and they want us to come teach them about how he uses his iPad. I said, don't ask me, ask him. He can teach you about it, So then we get into standalone pieces of equipment like medication dispensers or Ring doorbells. Those video monitoring doorbells like the Ring have been a game changer in technology, because when you think as a family member, and I know as a mother of a former teenage girl, having someone come to your door is the first point of safety, right? Or not safety. And knowing that you can talk to the person on the other side of your door without having to open it, that I could be at a conference in Illinois and somebody comes to my front door and triggers the motion sensor, the app pops right up, I could talk to the person at the door, they'd never have to know my daughter was home alone. Or it becomes a teachable moment. The app pops up on your phone and you help your own adult child walk through, how do I answer the door safely if somebody's a stranger? Smart speakers, as well as iPads and tablets, we're using for environmental controls. So we have folks who have significant physical disabilities, paralysis, and yet through smart speakers or tablets with big icons, they're able to turn lights off and on, open and close doors, have their thermostat change. All of those things that we take for granted because we physically can do that, technology can now help them do that. We have people who have significant physical disabilities who are living in their own homes with technology, and all they receive for staff support is for their personal care needs. And if they have an emergency, that they press their pendant or kick their kick plate and the staff can come. And then finally, the wireless sensor system, which we talked about. So I want to look at David real quick. He is another young man we serve. He does get voice prompts. My prompts, my voice are his prompts. So he calls his computer the woman in the box. And his father was late to dinner 2 nights before Christmas, and he told his father, I'm getting you a woman in the box for Christmas. We're still holding his father to that. So with David, sleep issues. The concern there was that he likes to stay up at night and watch TV. Mom said, I'm not going to call him to tell him to get into bed. He's an adult. So if he's not off his bed pad in the morning by 7:15, then my voice comes on and says, David, it's time to get up. If he doesn't get up in 5 minutes, he gets one more prompt. If he's not up by 7:30, Mom calls him. She gets an alert. Then it goes through his whole day. So the calendar down there, it walks him through what he needs to be doing in the morning, when he should be cooking his breakfast, when he needs to go in the bathroom and do his personal care routines. He has yet to be late for the bus in the 5 years that he's has the system, because it's walking him through everything he needs to do. Cooking safety, we've talked about. He has the camera at the door, that's the egress and ingress. The med dispenser, he wanted to take his own medication. He said, I'm not a child. I went to college for 2 years. We have a college program in our area that's a 2-year degree program for people with IDD. He said, I can take my own pills. So we got him a med dispenser. He learned how to use it while he was still in his home with Mom and Dad. And now he takes his medication every day. And if he forgets to take it, if he doesn't open the door, he is the first one to get the notification that says, hey, go take your meds. And if that doesn't happen, then Mom and Dad get the notification. So again, that dignity of risk. He's getting the opportunity to learn and make that choice, and then gets the help if he needs it. So I want to close today, and I think I'm going to be speaking on behalf of all 3 of us, to give you some tips on what you need to do next, okay? So the first question to ask is not, what technology do I need? The first question to ask yourself is, who do we consider? Does this person want technology in their home? They need to be a part of that decision. Maybe they don't want to have technology initially. Maybe they need to get comfortable with making that transition first. Also, start small. You don't have to have a $15,000 intricate, sophisticated system in the home. Get a $150 med dispenser and start with that. Be successful. Set the individual or your family member up for success. Because if you don't get the buy-in there, you're going to set the individual up for failure, tech up for failure, and everyone around you is going to be disappointed. The next and most important thing is, what are the priorities, the preferences, and the concerns for you, for your loved one, for the people who serve your loved one or support your loved one? Thinking about those outcomes. Again, it's not about the technology, it's about what are the outcomes that person is trying to address. Then we look at technology. And then, you know, you've only got 3 of us here today. There are tons of tech vendors out there. Take the time to research, look into what options there are. Talk to people, call us. We want to talk with you and help you understand before you jump right in. All of us do education with the people we support because we want people to know how to use it. And then finally, how will we implement it? Who's going to be the natural support? Who are the family and friends and neighbors who are willing to say, hey, I'll step in and respond. You know, I'm home after 5 p.m. I don't mind going over and getting alert, you know, between 5 and 7. What direct support staff are needed? Who are going to be responders should the system malfunction or should there be inclement weather and the system's down? We can help you think through all those things, okay? I would encourage you, again, to think about the way you use technology and think about how it's opened your lives up, and then consider how you want to open the lives up of your loved ones and the people you serve. We are not trying to replace the love and care that we can give to individuals. We're just trying to give everyone another tool to be successful. So thank you.